let's go back to the first entry. So this is just last week, and I'm going to try and go through here kind of fast, but basically I was just it's the end of the season for the team, and I needed to sort of see what I've seen, all of the hype around GPT-4 and what it can do for coding, and I've followed a lot of things, and I was thinking maybe it's time to really look at this in some depth. And I'm not saying that this is in depth, but this is a start.
3 hours.
So
3 hours, it says.
It was a 3-hour conversation as I was sort of learning what to do.
Wow.
Yeah. The next one was faster because I've started to learn how to develop prompts and things like that. So here I'm just starting out with something really simple. So this is me, wherever it says user, and I'm just saying, telling Chat GPT, let's start building a list in HTML, right? Because I just wanted a simple unordered list to show to develop a list of like edge cases for the 6CAN competition. So this is just me sort of getting used to how GPT does it. So immediately it comes back with, these are the two kinds of lists that you can do in HTML. I haven't given any context at this point, right? So it gives me a whole bunch of empty values, or just, these are clearly edge cases of certain coding kind of situations. And then I start just one at a time telling it, let's edit this list, right? So here's can obstruct. It's interesting how it changed what I saw as can obstructs navigation to can obstruct navigation. And the funny thing here is that it was interpreting cans, because I didn't give any context. It was interpreting this as the verb, right?
Okay.
So
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's thinking of this as verbs, right? And that leads to some cuteness further as we get further down. So I think here it still doesn't understand that's an object. And then as we get further down, all of a sudden I told it, like, the can here is a soda can. So we kept the verbs, right? But it added soda can, and it added it to all of the list items. So it figured that out. Then I just wanted to change it to, something more generic, like target. And so this is just me sort of using it as a secretary, somebody taking dictation for me to produce an output. So this actually took a lot longer than it would have been to just type it out, but I'm just learning the whole idea. And then I started giving a little bit more context, and so here I'm saying it's painted bright orange, and it's able to sort of keep up, and it's modifying its previous understanding. So it's doing okay. It's a simple ask of it, I guess, but as a first experience, it feels like it's really sort of figuring out what I'm asking for. And so the next thing I wanted to try, this is a totally different thing. This is like, we want to see if it can help create a vision pipeline in OpenCV. And all of a sudden, I'm getting much more specific, and it comes up with a pretty reasonable orange can detector class right out of the gate. Now, this is actually for desktop Java. I did specify Java because that's the environment that my team operates in. But from my experiments with OpenCV over the years, this seems like a very, very reasonable approach. It's chose to use erosion and dilation, whereas we would normally use something like blur to get rid of the jaggies in the image. But I've seen other pipelines use that approach, so it seems reasonable. And I didn't actually try compiling any of the code yet, so I don't know. One of the things you'll notice as we go through it seems very confident about its answers until you point out where it's wrong. By the way, I'm not looking at the screen, so I don't know if people are finding this interesting or not.
Very much so.
Huh? Yes.
I'm
Well-
finding it interesting.
Okay.
You
Cool.
got thumbs up. Keep
All
going.
right. I'm going to keep going. Okay.
I thought maybe you were going to compete with Taylor Swift for writing songs or something.
No, this is purely more. This is definitely more practical.
In the style of Taylor Swift. Give me
In the
an
style of, yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I wonder if we could write a soundtrack for this this
that's the
class
next
right here.
million
You
hours.
might be able to, yeah, you know, make it rhyme, no less.
Well, there's something kind of amazing coming up, so I'm just going to keep on going.
Sure.
So my purpose is here isn't to truly evaluate whether this is useful or compilable even, but it seems like it's doing it's basically using a color blob detector, and it's using the normal contours that you would find in OpenCV that to output the result. Whether things like this is appropriate or not, you could argue, but it seems to be doing the right thing. So, but it was desktop Java, so I asked it to rewrite the code so it works on an Android device because that's the environment that we're on. And lo and behold, it does it. I mean, this is an activity, which is this sort of the core construct for an app on Android. And again, because I've written and compiled and edited versions of this kind of thing in the past, this all looks approximately right to me. Again, I didn't try to actually compile it, but it's also got all of the on create and the on resume overrides, things that you've got to have for any kind of Android app. It's a very simple one, right? But then it stops right here. It was about to write another override and implement something else, and it looks like it has some sort of limit on the length of the prompts that it can supply. So I just ask it. I ask it here, on how long, how much text it can generate or something. Yeah. So I ask it to go ahead and continue, and then it came up with the sort of the next steps. And it's interesting how it started breaking this down into code fragments instead of a complete app being spit out. And it's actually explaining it. This is, and it all seems right on. Now, again, I wouldn't trust this until I actually ran it through a compiler and found out where the problems are. But I can say that this feels very much derived from a plethora of examples that are out there and searchable on the internet, right? So again, this is sort of where we run into that is this a copyright infringement kind of a thing? Exactly what sources, because this is starting to feel a little bit like it's being pulled from very specific examples that somebody has published, and yet you can't really track that down.
No attribution.
Yeah, and there's no attribution. And I'm not sure. In fact, I'm almost 100% sure that that's not actually because of how these language models work. It is some sort of a synthesis of many different examples. And so I don't really believe it's a pure copy paste kind of a thing from the examples it has. It does seem to understand. Every time I say understand, let's put quotes around it. Whatever understanding means to these things, it seems to add something deeper than just pure surface descriptions.
So its answers seem pretty concise.
The answers seem pretty good in many cases. I'll show some examples of where it gets a little bit awry coming up here. But yeah, here's what if it's lying on its side? What's what are you going to do to identify a can that's lying on its side? And it comes up with sort of a bounding box. And did it do it the right way in this one? I don't remember. It's doing a bounding rect bounding rect. No, so this is an orthogonal. So this is orthogonal to the camera. This kind of rectangle. So it wouldn't really do a great job because if a can's lying on its side, it can actually have a weird angle to the camera, right? So it's going to have these different aspect ratios.
But it seems like it even has relatively decent variable names, or like that one class name was.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
because it came up with can orientation detector, right?
from the it
From your
decided
prompt.
on that just from a prompt, yeah.
Wow.
And I'm still at the point where I'm learning how to prompt it appropriately, give it the right amount of context for each question. At this point, I'm not too concerned about it because I'm using the free version of Chat GPT, which is based on GPT 3.5. And I think that there was a limit of like 100 responses every 4 hours or something like that. And I wasn't going to be consuming nearly that much. Because this is not a, I guess I would say that it's not that hard to use, but it's also not like an intellectually lazy kind of a thing that you got to do. You got to be thinking about these prompts. So I was learning a lot as I went through this. But yeah, I'm asking what's the actual aspect ratio, because it looked like some of the things that it had responded to were wrong. And then it actually like goes out and finds this information. So it had completely guessed incorrectly on the aspect ratio, but then when I ask it to ask any questions of it about a specific decision it's made, it'll go back through and it'll correct itself very readily.
Code
yeah.
that is copyrighted, I imagine you wouldn't have access to it unless you paid for it, right? I mean, anything in the public domain is, if you can see it, it's can't be copyrighted, right?
That is not true.
No?
You can publish books and code and things like that, and you can claim a copyright on it regardless of your intent to get remuneration off of it, right? Or whether it's behind a paywall or not. So as there's a lot of open source code that's copyrighted, right? And you just and typically the requirement there is that you give some sort of attribution for it, at a minimum. But there's plenty of stuff that's free and yet still copyrighted.
Just check the different license types on GitHub. It's very interesting to read through them.
So there, and this is clearly one of those big areas that has to be resolved. This technology is so new and so breaking of previous norms that it's going to take a while for the legal system to catch up. And we were probably due for a copyright reevaluation of how copyrights work in this country and across the world for a long time, I would say. But this is going to shake things up even more and sort of force the issue.
I could swear they've already been some cases started of, is it in this or is it in the photo imagery generation? But where somebody sees an artist or creator sees something that they recognize that they've done, and I think some of those suits have started already. Yeah,
I've definitely seen that in the imagery generation. Here, it's a little bit harder to point to a specific source. But the litigation has commenced. Okay, let's see. So now I ask it to use the corrected aspect ratio, and it does it. And without going through it, it is a better aspect ratio. We'll see. What am I doing here? Oh, this is going back to where it's fallen over on its side. So this is, and you can see that it's gone back to, see there's a main right here. It's gone back to examples for desktop Java instead of Android Studio. So the Android Studio environment sort of didn't stick in the conversation. Although I probably could have asked it to convert that example back over. Okay, so let's see. Here I'm giving a lot more information. The fact there's 6 cans, and we need to find their locations on the field with the can detector code. And this is like it's suggesting the formula for getting the location on the field. And so I wanted to start visualizing this, right? And I wanted to see if it could generate an image. And this version of ChatGPT does not generate images, although there are versions of GPT-4 that can. But since an SVG is code, you can ask it to generate an SVG of the field. And so I asked it to do that, and this is what it produced.
So
None of
random
them.
locations.
These are random can locations. I don't think I even asked for them to be random at this point. I might have. I probably did. But yeah, it generated this image of the field, right? And this was supposed to be a border that it just painted incorrectly. So there was some more. I'm going to sort of go through these a little bit faster. Here's another one. I don't know where it came up with these colors. I don't know why it went from circles to squares. I asked it to correct that coming up, and it's back to circles again. But the cans are very, very large, right? This is the first time I asked it to generate the starting areas, and you can see they ended up these tiny little boxes down here and above. But they got them in the right place, right? I basically said the midline aligned with the top and the bottom of the field. So I keep going round and round. This is where I asked it to, fix their size, and it went to some, I have no idea why it's got this aspect ratio. And then I got, working with the prompts, I got it to sort of start to draw it a little bit better. It's aligned with the outside edge of this SVG, which is a border around the field, just to isolate it, so it lost its alignment. But this is sort of the closest I came using GPT 3.5. And the further I went, like at this point, I'm delivering more and more constraints throughout the conversation. And one of the things you notice is it keeps regenerating from scratch, right? It doesn't really sort of use the previous version. And all of a sudden, our can locations aren't randomized anymore. The starting location is a little bit better. But yeah, the more I constrain this, the more off it becomes. And all of a sudden we get this diagonal pattern, and this is on the left side instead, starting areas. And then we get to this weird aspect ratio thing again. And I'm just like, now the cans are different sizes, right? And this is representing the origin. But yeah, the field is right, except it went with the wrong aspect ratio on the field, and now the cans are like all sorts of different sizes, right? And this was funny. I mean, this looks like a little kind of Dilbert character or something like that. But basically, this is the point at which I give up, right? It's like it was getting more and more frustrating. I wasn't making any positive progress at this point. Okay, we're halfway through.
Conversations go with your team.
Frustrate you,
I heard two different things at the same time and couldn't tell.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So I was wondering, Kareem, which is easier to manage, your team or ChatGPT?
Oh, ChatGPT by a long shot.
Okay.
Really?
Well,
you said your team.
It doesn't have any motivation other than to try to please you. It may not, I wouldn't even say that's necessarily a motivation, but it, in human terms, but that is what it's trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one. And so for this one, sort of picking up where I left off, this one is using GPT-4. And the way you get access to GPT-4 is you pay for it. So ChatGPT gives you access to GPT 3.5, but if you pay $20 a month, you have the option of using the GPT-4 engine. I think the number of prompts you get is I think it's down to like 15 or 25 every 3 hours at the moment.
Wow.
And as I was using it over the last week, it seems to have slowed down a little bit. So I think a lot of people are hopping onto it rapidly. I can tell you that I am going to continue using it for the near term, and I'm going to be happy to pay that $20 a month.
Huh.
Absolutely.
So you think you're actually going to get something useful out of it? That doesn't seem like it at this point.
I would say that it looked hopeful, Certainly for the code generation kind of stuff, even with the 3.5, like it was just, I've never seen a computer being able to generate that kind of relevant, useful information. So even just as a research partner or a rubber duck, that you want to explain what you're trying to do I can see this as a way to really sort of get sort of stimulate your workflow. Yeah. So
Yeah, as
Um,
far as useful goes, in
mhm,
fact, I was using that yesterday. I get on there, and I don't know if you know what a regular expression is.
sure.
People are programmers, right? This kind of stuff.
Mhm, mhm,
I needed a regular. At one point, I needed a regular expression to determine if XML prologue was in the right place and the right thing. I asked for it, and out come this big old long thing. I got another time I used it. I need a regular expression to give me to validate a Windows path on the file system, and it went in. It caught all the stuff. We had to tweak it just a little bit, but it came out of there. So a regular expression is something that I use occasion. About 20 minutes after I get it to working, I forget how I got it to work, and
mhm.
um, and so maybe even quicker these days. But regardless, though, I asked for that thing, and I was very specific what I was asking, and it was able to give me a regex that I could plug right in, and it did what it's supposed to do. Was it had little extra tweaks to it because I couldn't tell it exactly what I needed extra on it, but that was a quick tweak and done. I mean, it turned an afternoon into 20 minutes. Easy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Again, be careful about testing what it produces. But it's a great way to get started and probably even evolve what you're working on. Again, yes, this is a total of 2 longish sessions with it, and that's it. So, it's kind of silly of me to come to really deep conclusions about it, but it seems very, very useful and hard to ignore going forward. So this is the beginning of the Chat GPT-4 session, and I'm going right back to generating SVG to see what it can do. My prompt is more, I guess, concise, has more of the context that I think it's going to need. So this is not a perfect comparison, but right off the bat, this is what it produces, the code, and this is the right aspect ratio. This is the field. This is correct, right? The cans maybe not the right size, and they're linear. There's a linear array here. So I asked for it to randomize starting positions. And this is interesting. I didn't actually produce the SVG because what it did is it assumed that this was a programming conversation, and that what I was asking, because I use words like playing field, right? And it's picking it up and even putting it in the comments, right? Starting zones, that's very, very helpful. But the fact that I use the word playing field, it kind of thought that I was developing a game and that I dynamically wanted to update the positions of these circles of the cans. And so it decided to offer placeholders, so variables, for where they would show, so that you could use some other scripting language to modify those locations, and it could be the basis of some sort of game. And then I basically said I wanted to create a specific example, not a dynamic one, and it understood. It says it understands my. Now it'll often say something like this when it doesn't. So be careful again about what it's claiming. But here it is, they've randomized the positions. And I also added the constraint that the center of the can cannot be inside the starting zone. I don't even know if that's a rule. It's probably just a nicety. In fact, I don't think it is a rule.
Yeah.
But
we would never. It's an implied rule.
Right. It's an implied rule. Yeah. So I turned that into a real rule just by saying it that way.
Are the cans properly sized, or how did it know to just? I didn't see where you said anything about the can sizes.
I did call them soda cans.
Oh, okay.
Right. And yet it wasn't exactly right. So again, I'm not sure how it came up with that, because I actually, right here, I'm asking, why did you choose a specific radius? And that it should actually be a 15. So I had a typo in my prompt. but it was producing a can radius of 15 here, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked it. All I'm doing is asking it to justify, and then it goes into this. I apologize. I made an error. It looks it up. It calculates it. The other one had a lot of trouble. So basically, we're doing 3 steps of scaling because we were going with basically we're going inches, and then it was correlating that with some definition of the width of the SVG, which is unitless. And so it was making some interesting decisions and switching up like the total number of units for the full width of the field, and adapting things over time. But depending on how you do the prompts, I was asking it for either 1 or 2 or 3 levels of scaling for it to calculate. And there were problems with 3.5, but version 4 was just doing it fine. But they did recorrect it. It looked up somewhere what the actual thing would be, right? And then it scales it to 18.2 units. So now they're a little bit bigger.
But you didn't even ask for it to make a new SVG.
Exactly. I didn't. It just corrected it. I didn't even ask it. I didn't even tell it you're wrong.
Right. No.
Right.
No.
I just said, why? Why did you choose this particular radius? And even though I gave it the wrong radius, it went.
Oh, my bad. Well, I'm at it. Here's the redone.
Exactly. It's really quite amazing.
Wow.
So it's doing this stuff pretty well. And here I'm asking it. Well, I didn't like the fact that actually I like the color scheme here, but I wanted them to be orange. And then I asked it to regenerate the random seed, so they'll be in different positions because they were the same in the last 2. And lo and behold, there it is. It just does it, right? And it hasn't made any of those mistakes that 3.5 was making in sort of regenerating the whole thing from scratch. If you look at the actual code as you go through, you can sort of see that it's taking that back in as input, and then just making the changes that are necessary. Or at least that's certainly how it feels. So this is interesting. At this point, I asked it to, I gave it the actual rules document.
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah,
and I asked, right? And I didn't even ask it to create a summary. I was just trying to give it more context for the next step, which was going to code. Right? And here we go. Now, the funny thing is, it finds all of these different concepts really, really well, and yet it makes detailed mistakes in a whole bunch of them. In fact, I didn't even bother correcting all of them.
Yeah.
But there is a, like I say here, number 4 is correct. The cans must be no closer than 5 inches to the walls, and they're also outside the starting zones. So it goes in and it regenerates the prompt for item number 4, and it does that correctly. I think one of the ones I didn't tell it to fix was the wall height. So somewhere in here, right here. So it knows that there are playing field walls, but it calls them 4 inches high when it clearly says in that same sentence is what, 8 inches?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why does it do that? I don't get that. It's like, and yet it figured out that the walls are important. So I'll go ahead and go through and actually correct these items. I didn't actually tell it to regenerate the new understanding before I moved on, so I probably should have done that. But so here we're going on to, I'm telling it that we have a webcam on the robot that we're building, and we have OpenCV pipeline that can detect cans in the frame and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm asking, suggest a strategy for determining location of the field, location of the cans, right, while the robot is rotating. So it's something we'd already started, writing, and it was just clearly we're just going to do a in-place scan of the field. And we already knew what the approach was going to be, but we wanted to see what GPT would say. And I probably should have broken this down because it's more readable in the actual chat. It's being all munched together with the HTML here. But this is a real good strategy. I mean, this is basically the same strategy that we're having to scan in place and use like, it even suggested like using k-means to resolve redundant can positions, because it seems to understand somehow that while you're rotating, you might catch the same can in multiple images.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go down the k-means approach, just because I'd never actually coded that before, and so I didn't know how to debug that kind of situation. So I wanted a simpler strategy, and boom, it comes up with a simpler strategy, right? And here all we're doing at this point is basically just throwing away subsequent detections if they happen to be close enough in position to the previously calculated position for the can. So it's basically a thresholding operation. Less effective, right? But it's still amazing. So I ask it, why don't you code that for me? Right? And boom. It's got a can detector, right? Here is rotating 1 degree at a time. I didn't give it any constraints about that. It's showing that you would need to capture a frame. You'd need to process the frame. So this is clearly boilerplate code, and yet, there's this, a way to, you're building up a list of detected cans, and then you're going through them to determine if all of them are unique, and basically scrubbing them if they're not.
I mean,
right?
It looks pretty clean, right? It's not a jumbled mess.
No, it's not a jumbled mess. It's actually a very good starting condition. And then it tells me what it's doing, right? It describes it really, really well. Again, I don't know for sure that this is actually right, but it looks right to me, right? Just based on my history. So here I'm adding that it can only move 1 can at a time. Basically some more stuff. I'm showing that there's the size of the robot. And then I'm basically pointing out that there could be cans that are in the way, right? And so, how can I navigate a path? And it recommends the A-star algorithm, right? And again, this all looks pretty much right? So now I'm asking you to update the SVG to add the round robot and the field divided up into cells, because it was originally recommending cells the size of the robot for the A-star division, and so it redraws it with the cells, and so here's where I expected to break it, and I did. Can you add the path that the robot would take following the A-star algorithm to this SVG? And basically it just basically stalls right here, right? And I point out that it's incomplete. It comes back and says, okay, I'll complete it. It seemed to get a little bit further, but it did not complete it. So it just timed out, right? But imagine what it would have to do to be able to actually complete this, right? It would have to be able to generate some code on the side for the actual implementation, full implementation of the A-star, and run it through the example, positions that we have here in order to generate. I wouldn't expect a human to be able to do that without taking, a multi-hour separate break just to code it up and run it through an example. Let's see. Then I suggested it should be that the grid size that it came up with here is too big, right? The cans are never larger than their enclosing rectangle, and I suggested that maybe it should be the size of a can, and then it started coming back with a 2 by 2.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles. I wanted them to be a little bit larger, so I stopped it and told it to generate 3 inches, right? And this is actually interesting in itself. At this point, it's a much denser grid, right? There would be many more lines of code. Yeah. And so it basically just said, I only included a few lines of the code for brevity to complete the grid, right? And it gives instructions in this. There's a comment right in here about completing the grid. So that was interesting also.
Got a little
And
lazy. Huh?
yeah, it got a little lazy. And again, maybe it's aware of the limit of how long its responses can be. And so that's why I did it. And I could have compartmentalized it a bit more and asked it to generate just different sections. And then I ask it, can you write an A-star algorithm in Java? Right? Boom, it does it. That probably took it, 30 seconds to generate all this text, and it failed again, right? At this point, it didn't complete this particular thing. There's probably some other functions that are missing. So it basically timed out, and I timed out as well. So this is the end of my second session. It was just like it was bedtime kind of a thing. So that's my first two experiences with ChatGPT for robots.
Whoa.
So I found that super interesting, and I decided that I'm gonna, at this point forward, my coders are going to start experimenting with this stuff over the summer, and I'm betting that a lot of teams by the fall will be using this as a standard tool set.
Mm.
Well, that's going to raise the bar for beginning teams.
Yeah, I think it'll have a. I think when so I think students are using ChatGPT already. The standard complaint is that they're using it for cheating on homework. And I can see how they might get too reliant on it and not be able to do tests well when they don't have access to it and things like that. And it's being a problem for teachers to assess, especially.
Calculator.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same. It's not that different of a problem. It's just this thing is on steroids, and I don't think kids are going to be able to avoid using it going forward. And I don't think adults can afford to either. If you are a knowledge worker in any way, shape, or form, this is impossible to ignore.
So
Yeah,
really
improving.
good
Go ahead.
conversation. One quick comment, I played with it a little bit myself, and I noticed that on ChatGPT 3, there's a 4K limit on the question plus the answer. That's why you got that one that didn't finish.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be true on ChatGPT 4. I've never used it, and I didn't see you get to that limit on your.
And he's,
No, I hit limits on 4 as well.
yeah, but he's paying for it, so I assume that limit's probably going to be a lot larger.
It didn't seem like it was that much larger. In terms of the size of the response, it seemed like it was the same limit there, and that might be the fact that this is the GPT modeled through ChatGPT, right? Which adds some extra security and politeness constraints around it, that kind of stuff. And I think that limitation is probably the same for regardless of which model you're using. But when you start out a conversation and you're using the paid version, you can choose. It'll still default to 3.5, but there's a little dialog box at the very top of the session where you can choose ChatGPT 4, and the experience was quite different.
I was very interested to see that you followed up on conversation. When I tried it, it always seemed like it forgot the prior question and started over again. But you would say, "Oh, well, like fix this one little thing," and it would come up with that same stuff again. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was able to do that on both of them for me, but it did it much better on GPT-4.
Yeah, to your point about cheating on tests and all that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've already had some discussion because improving, one of the things, what do? We recruit people.
Yep.
And we've already sent out a company. Well, the way the recruitment works and that kind of stuff is now across all of our enterprises. It was used to be if you were in the Dallas Enterprise would recruit for the Dallas Enterprise, but that's not what we're doing anymore. So we've got we just acquired somebody. Some of you may or may not have received mail about that. Jump Analytics out of Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a enterprise or a company wide set of folks that are now doing recruiting. So you may get a call from a recruiter from Ohio or Austin or wherever we're at, right? And so we sent a thing out there and said, listen, we have this chat GPT thing. Here's what it can do. If your candidates are declining an in-person on-premise interview, I would hold it suspect of this, because they could easily be doing that on a Zoom call, doing something else, looking at the answers. In fact, I was listening to one of our they were doing a technical interview, and I was listening talk about Angular. And after the interview was done, I called Skylar over and I said, Skylar, how'd that interview go? He said it didn't really go really well for that person. I said, well, I overheard one of your questions. I typed it into Chat GPT. Here's its answer. Skylar went, I'm hiring that person. Not even, I mean, it was as fast as he could read it, done deal. It was a correct answer. It was all it was supposed to be for what it needed. And it's like, so man, that's scary, because I would hire that person. This person that on the phone right now with all the other junk, if they gave me that answer for that one question, I'd probably recommend them.
So my answer to that is that, you know, let's say that I'm like sitting down for that interview. I would demand to be able to use Chat GPT in the interview, right? In the actual test, right? I understand how those like on-premise tests work, and and I think that they're testing the wrong thing now. I think everything's changed, and it's going to be more like it's not going to be how well can you actually answer this particular question about this technical aspect of this API to show your knowledge of it. It's show me how you're thinking and how you're using tools like Chat GPT to come up with the answer, or and even beyond the specific answer, what's the next strategy, right? I think it's going to become. I think you're going to be paid more based on how well you use tools like this than your underlying fundamental knowledge within just a few years, probably.
I had that very discussion this afternoon with one of my coworkers. Also, by the way, when Google first hit back in the aughts, back in the 99 aughts kind of thing, we figured,
same kind of thing, yeah.
Yep, same exact kind of thing, and we figured you could get a $10,000 pay raise just by knowing what Google was and how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real deal, you know.
And it became an indispensable tool that you don't even think about for everybody, and this is just the next level of that.
It's pretty much water now, right?
But there's something more going on here. So it's you know, I'm not going to invoke magic or anything like that, or true general intelligence or anything like that, but there's something that happened. It's even detectable between 3.5 and 4.0, where the main difference was just the number of parameters that they ingested. So who knows what GPT 5, 6, 7 are going to do?
Yeah, there's a YouTuber out there named by the name of Nick Choppas that a lot of us follow. Really sharp guy, does lots of great videos. I don't know how he does all the video he does. Lots of great videos with performance and C# and the whole works. And he got on there with GPT-4 about a month and a half ago. Probably a little earlier than that, because he got early access. And he goes, look at this. I have Chat GPT-4. I ask it several things. It's writing senior dev level code. And if you go look at Nick Choppas on YouTube, you'll find him. And it's one of his, you know, he puts out tons of videos. So I can't say it's his one of the last couple, because he puts out 2 or 3 a week, it seems. And he's very critical of a lot of things. And I said, well, what about this? And they go, oh, you'd want to do this. And he's just literally writing senior dev level type code from what he asked it to do. Obviously, he didn't do everything, but for what he asked, it was doing exactly what he would do if he was coding it.
So how do we get it to say ingest Ray Kassler's code and debug the odometry in the style of David Anderson's presentation?
You want to try that? It's like I could try doing that live if Ray has his stuff available on GitHub or something like that.
It sounds fun.
David Sanderson's pseudocode is available online.
I don't, yeah, even though it's like well-published code, I think that's a little bit narrow, right? This OpenCV stuff, I was kind of amazed that it was able to sort of translate it into specifically Java and then Java on Android. That, you know, it actually looked right. And I know that the number of the examples that are out there are, you know, dwindling in both of those cases, because you don't do a lot of OpenCV with Java, and it's even more rare to do it with Java on Android. And yet it had enough of a resource base where it could, you know, generate reasonable answers. But if we went specifically to David Anderson, I don't. Who knows? We might be surprised.
One thing I was surprised about when I was trying it is that you could say, write this code in this language, and it would. And you could say, what websites have examples of that? And it wouldn't tell you. It's clearly looked it up, like you say, in its language model. It's looked through all this stuff and it's found all this stuff, but it won't tell you where it found it from.
Well, again, I think it's partly a synthesis, right? So it's not like it's this one specific example that'll return. It's some sort of amalgamation of multiple examples, and it probably intentionally doesn't even maintain the original resource, just so that they can say that they're not like,
It's anonymized.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Still a very good talk, and it is a very interesting thing to play with.
Yeah, we're looking forward to your next hour on that topic, Kareem.
Yeah, sorry I took up so much time.
No, you need to
That was a lot
apologize.
more
That
than I
was
expected.
awesome.
You're on the bleeding edge, Kareem. So
Yeah, I've been thinking about using it for marketing stuff and blogs, but yeah, or images too. But it's all time, right? Because at the end of the day, you still have to sit down and figure out how to drive it.
No, that's true. But you know, it's like this may have been built for programmers, so you know, you've got some coding experience. It was built by programmers, and it's like I didn't find it that difficult to learn how to generate useful prompts for it.
Well, I guess if you're a good communicator and you can interact well with humans, you'll probably do pretty good with this, then, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know if it was more about how well I communicate with humans, because there's some doubts about that, but it was. But you know, it just. I think it needs a little bit of consistency in the language that you give it, and it does seem like context matters quite a bit to the quality of its responses. So maybe thinking up what is missing from that context is something that you've got to learn to develop a bit.
Kareem,
Yeah.
you know, when you went to 4, you actually did a much more detailed description of the problem. If you went back to 3 and gave it that same description, how would it do? Do you know? I mean, I guess you.
I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would do better. I'll tell you what. Let's find out.
Excellent.
All right. If you got time for it, I can
go
ahead and pull it up right now. So okay. So,
remember to share your screen.
Right. Okay, so this is the last chat session. Where's my cursor? Oh, it's very narrow edge. Page up, maybe? No. Here's the biggest problem is you get this long, I think I'm trying to drag the thing up, and it looks like, I just have to scroll. It looks like the projection window from Meet was interfering with me selecting it, but okay. So here's the prompt for the field, right? The very first one that I did in version 4. And then I'm going to go with a new chat, and this time it's going to default to GPT 3.5. I'm going to paste that in, and we'll see what it comes up with. The same thing. I am not a language model, but I can do. Oh, it's not coming up with SVG right away. Why is it stalling? I've never seen a stall that early in the process.
Huh. Well, it is evening. Maybe this is a really busy time for
Oh, there it goes. Yeah, maybe.
$700,000 a day servers.
So this time it refused to generate the SVG. That's interesting. I never had that problem before. I do not have the ability to create SVG images.
Well, but it offered to give you the SVG code last time, right? Yeah.
The SVG code.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so if we go from that and just paste it into, oh, you probably can't see this tab because I'm doing, let me, oof, that's horrible. Let me switch over to the other tab so you can see what it generated, or I'm just visualizing it. Stop, restart a tab, and go to this one. And that's what it generated. SVG 3.5, exact same description.
Wow. Not so
Which
good.
is not clearly not so good. Yeah. So there's definitely a qualitative difference between working with the two engines.
Huh.
Okay.
That's cool.
That's all I had.
That's a lot. I feel so much more informed.
Thank you very much for that, Kareem.
You're
was
very
excellent.
welcome. It was fun sharing it.
That's worth some kind of star. Virtual star? I don't know.